Hey everyone, John Raridan here with Nintendo World Report TV, and Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition is out! Back when this was first announced, I took a look at the technical makeup of the game based on that first trailer. Obviously, when we're doing technical analysis on a trailer uploaded to YouTube, there's always going to be some margin for error, both because the game itself is still in development and you're working with a compressed video source. But now that I do have the full game in front of me, I get the opportunity to go back and check my work, see how the game actually holds up in person. Now, as a quick refresher, Xenoblade Chronicles X on Wii U ran at 720p and 30 frames per second. In the previous analysis, I stated that the Wii U version didn't use any anti-aliasing, but I have been corrected on that, and it does make use of a very basic post-process, kind of blurry anti-aliasing solution. It isn't horribly effective, but just to be clear, it is indeed there. Now, the trailer for the Switch version was running at 30 frames per second and 1080p. From that, I inferred that handheld resolution would likely be the full 720p. By and large, that has held true in the final game. We also get an unexpected but very welcome pass of what looks like FXAA, a post-process anti-aliasing solution that isn't horribly strong, but it's better than just giving us a raw 1080p image. Now, data mines have indicated that both docked and handheld resolution are variable. I personally have only been able to spot signs of dynamic resolution when playing in handheld mode. While docked does also seemingly have the potential for dynamic resolution, it doesn't seem to kick in very often. I did try and get into some combat, run around New Los Angeles, and just in general try to do things to stress the engine, but I never managed to actually catch a sub 1080p count. Even over on handheld mode, when the resolution does drop, it's just barely dropping, and I really had to look out for it. This could easily be mistaken for a locked 720p. Now granted, I've largely only explored the opening areas, but at this point, I have a decent grasp on how to stress this engine, and it just wasn't happening. Likewise, frame rate is overall very solid, and thus far significantly better than the original release. I was able to get a brief stutter here or there, usually on quick camera moves or on camera cuts during cutscenes, but never anything sustained, which I was able to see in the original Wii U release. Now at a glance, seeing that a 720p Wii U game can run at 1080p on Switch wouldn't be that incredibly impressive. We've seen this before with Wii U ports. What's interesting here is just how many small improvements are hiding out in this remaster beyond that resolution bump. Obviously, we have the improved character models, but that's not all. In my initial trailer analysis, I noticed that geometry LODs and draw distances seem to have been pushed out, so the first place I went when I got to New LA was this pair of buildings at the end of the commercial district. These always stood out to me in the original release because their low-resolution models didn't swap out until you were very close to them. On Switch, that LOD we saw in the original seems to have been entirely replaced. I actually struggled to tell if this super low-resolution texture ever shows up on these buildings in the Switch version, perhaps when you're across the city from them. And for the record, that Wii U footage is with all of the data packs installed on the hard drive. And let's actually talk about those data packs. Back when Xenoblade Chronicles X launched on Wii U, the physical version came with the option to download and install optional data packs to improve the performance of the game. Essentially, you could install elements of the game directly onto your hard drive, so that the game would be less limited by the read speed of the actual physical game disc. I produced a video on it way back then to look at how the game's opening compared with and without the data packs, so naturally I pulled that video back up to run it against the Switch version. The difference is pretty night and day. Geometry and texture pop-in is massively reduced, if not entirely eliminated in many cases. Alpha effects like fog and god rays now render at a significantly higher resolution and sort correctly along the edges of overlapping geometry. In the original game, low-resolution alpha effects would give the impression that the game was running at a lower resolution than it actually was. This issue is a long-standing aspect of the Xenoblade engine, but here, for the first time in the series' history, we've seen it just seemingly solved. It just isn't an issue at all in the definitive edition. I also noticed some nice changes to lighting in this cutscene, which has a hard-coded time of day, but that's why we like to use it for comparisons. This shot of the Grexes running over the plains no longer takes place in the shade and is now more vibrantly lit. I think it's just a much more pleasant-looking shot. Lighting in general is improved in the definitive edition with additional dynamic light sources and higher quality shadows. Now, don't get me wrong, you can still spot plenty of pop-in for details, especially around New LA, just like in the original. but overall it's still an improvement. And of course, speaking of pop-in, I have had multiple requests to comment on how the grass renders, because after all, I have a reputation to uphold, and I can report that grass renders in the same manner as the original Xenoblade X, which is unique from every other game in the series. Rather than a circle of grass rendered based on camera position, grass in Xenoblade X renders out in these sort of square chunks. However, these chunks, like most other details in the definitive release, now render farther from the camera, making them much harder to notice when they pop in. Overall, I have been very impressed with the visual update to Xenoblade X. It is actually more impactful than I initially anticipated, and that's without even going into the myriad of great quality of life adjustments that have been made to the game. There are still a few noticeable visual exceptions. Most obvious to me is the cube map reflections in a series that at this point has pretty much entirely made the switch to screen space reflections. It's a little thing, but it's one of the few things that betrays the time period and hardware of the original release, and it's sort of the one thing I wish they would have updated for this one. But in virtually every other aspect, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition is a triumph. It's hard to come up with any reasonable argument that this isn't the best way to play the game. In my opinion, the updates here are more than enough for Xenoblade X to maintain its standing as the best looking and best running game in the series. It was a technical triumph a decade ago on Wii U, and it remains so on Switch. Now we'll just have to wait and see if those rumored Switch 2 enhancements really come to pass, at which point I will undoubtedly be back to do this all again. But that's all I've got for right now, so if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and consider subscribing to Nintendo World Report TV. You can chat with us about this or anything else Nintendo related in our Discord using the link in the description. And of course, check out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. If you have any technical questions or you just want to talk about Xenoblade, you can reach out to me on your social media platform of choice using the handle on screen. Once again, my name's John Raridan, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.